We're winding down with the last talk, but I saved the best for last, and I'm kind of scared. I'll introduce the panel as they walk up. Karen Bernstein from Bernstein IP will have, she'll probably, I don't know, whoop my butt up here. So I'll take one for the team. We have Braden Pollock from Legal Brand Marketing. I talked to him earlier, probably the premium, the whale of Web 2 domains. That's what we call them in Web 3. We'll get into that. And then, of course, you heard from Cardano earlier with Fred. We have Andreas Pletscher, COO of the Cardano Foundation up here with me. So I'll join you guys. I'll moderate this panel. And I'm kind of going to leave Karen for last only because I smell the trouble here. We'll start on the Web 3 side. There's a lot of things your colleague said earlier about decentralization, the combination of decentralization and centralization, bringing both together, security, and what it takes to build not just great Web 3 apps, but maybe Web 2 apps in the future. What have you seen at Cardano that you think can lend to merging the gap and building these hyperscale products in both realms?
Well, there's a couple of elements that we need to cover, and obviously after my CEO spoke already so brilliantly in the morning, it's a bit of a challenge. But I mean, the main angle is education. And everybody has spoken about this, and it's really the key part is to educate about what is the possibility and the capabilities of this technology and bring this closer to the Web 2 space, mainly to hardcore enterprises, to explain them what blockchain is all about and mainly what it is not. So there are limitations, there are areas it doesn't make any sense, and what we then do is mainly building bridges, and this time it's really bridges from Web 2 into Web 3 to help accommodate, to help educate, and actually show the art of the possible.
Yeah, there may be like that stubborn Web 2 user that still says to this day, oh, blockchain's not fast enough. Oh, there aren't enough real utility that we can use on a day-to-day basis. Maybe Braden that invests in 6-figure, 7-figure domains says, well, maybe Web 3 isn't there yet. Like maybe the value prop isn't there yet. What do you have to say to people like that?
Well, it's again the art of possible and showing the people actually what blockchain can do. And it's mainly simple things, having something that is touchable. We have done a nice project with Georgia, with the national wine industry. And what we helped to do is actually, we just used the wine production. We put a simple QR code on it, which is immutable, but is actually linked to the blockchain and show a traceability of the product with the respective source of origin to prove that this is actually something valuable. And when you have like a Web 2 conference, you actually show a wine bottle, they're suddenly not so scared anymore of what the blockchain technology is. Right. And that's really it. At the end of the day, blockchain is infrastructure. It's boring, huh? It's what we make out of it that is cool.
Sure, yeah, fantastic answer. And I'll turn it over to Braden a little bit here. You mentioned earlier in private, right, that you're investing in these top tier domains, pure quality. I know you haven't ventured into the Web3 angle yet. I think there maybe isn't enough value prop for you, maybe. I don't want to speak for you. Maybe what is it that you're looking for when you value a domain that's maybe not in the .coms, the .nets of the world? It's more fringe in that capacity.
Well, profitability, right? I'm looking for not only margin, but the biggest TAM, biggest total addressable market I can find. And when we're talking about blockchain names, it's just not a very big market at this point. Now that might change, but at this point it's a small market, which makes it much more speculative than a .com or .net or .org or .io. Even some of the newer extensions are more well known because there's more use. Right? There's a lot of friction when it comes to Web 3. And the general public doesn't understand that. So if they're not going to understand it until it's idiot-proof, then there's not going to be adoption.
Right, and is it, because like I could then play devil's advocate and say, well, there's millions of Web3 names that only work as wallet addresses for now, right? But you can eventually, with our vision, incorporate some Web 2 aspects. So let me paint an example here for you, and maybe you can tell me if this is of value to you. If I buy a domain, and right off the bat, that domain works as a wallet address, and if I have an e-commerce store, I can start accepting crypto payments all over the world. Would something like, would a 4-letter word be of value to you? Do you think you can start opening up to those examples and use cases, or are we still a long ways away in your mind?
Well, we're still a long ways away. It's still speculative because how many people have wallets and are paying with crypto? Not that many people relative to 8 billion people on the planet, right? It's a very, very small market. And if somebody can't go on Amazon and just buy a thing the way they're used to buying a thing, then there's too much friction. And then it becomes, as an investor, far more speculative.
Sure, and are you looking for, like, let's say I go to GoDaddy, for instance, right? Are you looking for the ease that, a regular registrar like that brings to the casual user, that someone can buy easily and start any business online? Is that the ease of use you're talking about, or is it much more?
Yeah, I mean, putting in your credit card and just buying a thing, right? Whether it's GoDaddy or Amazon or wherever. And right now, people need wallets, and they need MetaMask, and they need all these things. And to do that, it is too much friction. Somebody needs to explain to them how to do it. That's the issue. And again, from an investor standpoint, why do I want to invest in this thing that people really can't use yet?
Right. And just to give context, any type of domains you could disclose that you own now and you see promise with? I know you mentioned something to us in private, but maybe what you hold as of right now?
Well, I mean, I've got a few thousand names, and about 350 of those are oneword.coms.
Pretty big portfolio, top quality. I know Karen's chomping at the bits to tell us, wait, hold your horses. Is it because this is a global, Web3 means like a global system where maybe, for example, us here in the US really can't govern it the way it wants to? I know it's in the process of doing things like that, but where, from the legal standpoint, do you find there's legal risk here all over the place? And if you can share maybe some of that insight here.
I mean, Bitcoin and other types of Web3 coins are subject to federal governmental interference. It's been known that there are a number of cryptocurrencies that the Securities and Exchange Commission in the United States has gone off, and now they're compliant. And we know about the newest MiCA legislation in the EU, which has to do with cryptocurrency, although there are exceptions in registering with MiCA. And I just think that there is some governmental institutional sort of, I'll say, regulation that will need to happen. But in terms of, you're not really touching upon what I wanted to talk about, which is
the floor is yours.
The ICANN, the Web 2, Web 1, Web 3 bridge. I think it's a fascinating concept. I think that ICANN is seeing an existential crisis with Web 3. I think that ICANN, at least it was recently reported today in the blogs, that ICANN has actually lost some money due to the fact that there's been a drop in the legacy TLDs of about 4%, which is .com, .net, .gov, which might be a great opening for Web3 to say, hey, here's another way for ICANN to take a fee. But what my biggest concern with Web3 is that I respect the communities that are within Web3, but they're going to need, if they really are on board with bridging this gap with ICANN, they're going to need to start going to ICANN meetings, and they're going to need to start getting involved, because it's free to participate with ICANN, and make themselves known and become like a normal, like normalize themselves within the community and educating. And I do think that there are some actors in the Web3 community that are, but I say the more the numbers, the better. I think that ICANN is not necessarily going to be ruling the Web3 space. Who's going to rule the Web3 space, right? And I know that there's some safer aspects to Web3 and the transparency, but who's going to be able to fall under ICANN unless they're contractually obligated to? And I like the fact that there's a lot of companies that are willing to play nice with ICANN and subscribe to uniform dispute resolution, domain name disputes, and want to help trademark holders, and that's all fantastic. But, and I agree with Braden that there has to be some sort of acceptance and make it user-friendly for people to download the browser like we did in the late 80s and early 90s when we had dial-up and we went on AOL. So that's just kind of my belief.
You could use the internet and you can't be on the phone. Sorry, Manny, go ahead.
Name abuse.
Yeah, so to the extent
that's another good thing that some of them are signing up for.
Yeah, I mean, the domain name abuse, but also the fact that in a lot of instances, because of the transparency of Web3, it's probably going to be at least a little bit easier to see who owns domain or web identities, whatever, or identities, whatever, digital identities. And I do find it very interesting because there are some more secure aspects to Web3 that I think will be helpful. And there are some other companies in the Web3 space that talk about that, so.
Yeah, so going back to the Web3 domains and then transitioning to Web2, we're also going to need hosting, right? Email services. This all comes with domains, and we're going to need chains that are fast enough to provide that throughput to make that happen, but at the same time that are secure enough to make that happen. I know you guys made your case with Cardano earlier, but what makes that challenge so hard? Because every chain, for example, is trying to solve this. Very few can do it. What makes that such a hard challenge?
Well, I cannot speak for all the chains, obviously, but I mean, as mentioned previously also by Lily, it's every chain has its own dedicated use case and their strengths and weaknesses. And I think there will be a whole series of chains that are going to survive in the near and in the midterm, and obviously also design the architecture for the future. And I think the key is interoperability, and it's really to make sure that you profit from each other's strengths where actually you can. And I think it's really the collaborative aspect that needs to play, really fully distributed, fully decentralized, cross-chain. And if we reach that consensus, I mean, I think then the world is ours.
Is there a world here where, and I'll go around the horn so maybe you all can comment, I'll start with Braden. Is there a world here where you can see ICANN maybe dethroned by a decentralized entity of some sort, or is ICANN always going to be the one? Is it always going to be .coms at the premium tier level, maybe .nets, .govs, and then is there ever a world where that narrative switches? And in your mind, obviously with your experience, Web3 is coming. I don't know how fast, but do you think it could ever get to that scale?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that the legacy extensions, we've got 40 years of history, right? So, and it's not going to take 40 years for Web3. It'll move much faster. But it's going to take a while for the legacy extensions to get dethroned. And the other thing is, I think right now, we're all sorting out which chain is the best and what the features are going to be and what's going to work. And the general public doesn't care how the sausage is made, right? I think the adoption will happen when GoDaddy says, register this, and these are the features you get with it, right? And the rest,
Web3 features, right?
Nobody cares about the rest, sure. Right? And it's just like, this is what you get with this domain name.
Cool. Yeah. Is there a world now where you buy a domain, say tomorrow, and instead of just getting email and hosting, you could add Web3 features? Like, would that be of interest in that specific industry where, wait, we value domains, or we valued domains this way for a long time. Now we have to switch our formula because there's so many other factors coming from the Web3 side that we have to take into account.
I think it's the package of features that are offered. And even to call them Web3 features,
sure, that's friction in itself.
That doesn't help, sure. Right? These are the other things that this domain will do for you, right? So they're selling right now SSL, and they're selling email, and they're selling hosting, and it's like, well, you're also going to get this with this package of features for this price, and the rest I don't think matters.
Yeah, Karen, I'd also like to ask, like, this decentralization world where it's anonymity is prevalent, right? I know that's an issue, at least on the legal side. Is that also a hurdle here? Is that what's taking so long? Like, also, can you share about timelines for how you see the U.S. maybe, or like legal regulatory framework when it comes to not just domains but identity online, and maybe what that looks like?
Well, that's a lot to unpack.
You told me you had a lot to talk about.
Let's start with the first one. What was part one of that question again?
Yeah, so regulatory framework and maybe timeline. Let's go there first, right? Where do you see maybe the legal framework and how long it's going to take for maybe domains and digital identity to get over the line?
When you talk about digital identity, are we talking about identifying who owns the digital assets?
So let me paint an example, I guess. So like a Web3 identifier, which is just only a Karen.eth online currently, which acts as your wallet address.
Right.
If that were to transition over to Web 2, I know some have asked, can in Web 2 we keep the anonymity we have from Web 3? I say yes because I'm a degen, but I know that's not how that works.
So it's funny, I kind of think of it the other way around, which is that the way it's been since the European Union passed the the GDPR, which stands for a General Data Protection Regulation, which they've now called NIS2. There's a lot of acronyms in internet law, which has to do with disclosure of personal data. I'm sure you might be familiar with the whole concept of we use these kind of cookies that you see on websites and submitting to what sort of information that they can collect or using advertising cookies. And that stuff's always been shielded through ICANN. A number of years ago when GDPR was passed, ICANN's basically the community, because ICANN is not really a corporation. It is a body of multi-stakeholders that contribute to the way policy is made on the internet. And I don't think that a lot of the mainstream understands how ICANN works. But in any event, the whole problem was that the GoDaddies, I'm sorry GoDaddy people, the registrars of the world that you buy domain names from, at first were showing people who were not European Union residents, like Americans, they were still revealing in the who owned the domain names. And then it was just decided, I think on an informally an industry level, that it was too much of a hassle to start parsing, where somebody lived, because conceivably you could be an EU subject and live in the United States, for example. So now when you go to Whois to see who owns a domain name, you really don't see very much. It's like privacy. So I don't really see much of a difference between that and Web3, to the extent that it would be compatible somewhat. In fact, I do understand that certain things in Web3 actually are more transparent than in Web2.
Yeah, you could argue, right, that you see all the transactions on chain.
Yeah.
Granted, you won't see my name. Maybe it's the 26-character wallet address. But I think that verifiability, if you will, and the ability to still remain somewhat anonymous is captivating to the Web3 and crypto audience. And I think the way we're going right now, we want to keep that functionality in the Web2 world, but somehow have the best of both worlds. It's a tough ask, right? It's pretty tough, and
I think it's consistent. I think that it's actually stricter in the Web2 world than it is in Web3. Now, to the extent that you're a trademark holder and you want to try and find out who's, using a trademark, that's a whole different conversation. But insofar as financial transactions, it's there. So you have transparency for transparency's sake that actually doesn't give you a lot of privacy.
Well, I think that the Whois privacy is the registrar's advantage, right? So GoDaddy doesn't want public Whois; they want private Whois, so that you have to hire their brokers to acquire the name.
Yeah, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
yeah. And as far as anonymity, there you can block your information, right, from that in that same platform. The Whois. You can just, I guess, pay a little extra and block.
Well, actually, it's included.
Right.
It's no longer an extra service.
Right. Yeah. For the longest time, it was. Yeah. So interesting that you mentioned you see a lot of similarities between Web3 and Web2 now, as far as anonymity is concerned. I think in Lily's talk earlier, she briefly mentioned, I don't know if you caught it, maybe monetizing email, which is something we haven't seen yet, not even, maybe just as an idea floating around. I know at Cardano you've talked about a few different use cases for domains as well too. Like, I'd like to maybe ask Andreas, like, is there anything new on that frontier that you guys want to see innovated that you haven't seen yet, that maybe, digital identity can be a part of?
Well, I just repeat myself. You heard Fred's talk earlier. It's really all about the identity. And I think one of the true advantages of Web3, combined with all the new features, brings really great advantages for the end user, because they're actually in control of their identity and of their data again. So they can decide what they want to disclose. And I think if you go down that route, that's going to be tremendous advantages for the end user.
Yeah. Do you see a world where it's just all digital identity for everything, including things in real life and real life experiences?
Well, it has to in order to scale, and I think I recently had a chat with a couple of NGOs about human rights, and the human right is to have an identity. It's written down in its core, and what we continuously do at our frontiers with refugees, we actually take away their identity and just force them to give me name, country where you were born in, and plenty of data that they don't need to disclose. We just need to have an identity. And the identity is pretty simple. And that allows a person in no matter which country to get access to a mobile phone and to open a bank account, and that are actually living human beings. And I think that's where we should go.
Yeah, I always say like a global payment system seems like the perfect use case for crypto, right? And like you own your domain, you own your namespace, anyone in the world can send you money in any currency. It'll, with instant finality, virtually no fees. And if that's the world we're going to, then obviously digital identity has to be a big part. Braden, I'd love to hear what maybe you think about that vision. Again, it's pretty big in nature, but if that's, again, the route we're going to, does your business change at all? And does your portfolio start shaking up and start involving maybe different TLDs of some sort?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna go where I think the value is.
Sure.
Right, but I'm gonna wait till the market develops, and I would rather spend more on those names when the market is there. And in the meantime, because if it takes 5 years, meantime, I can be investing in stuff that I know is going to sell, and it's less speculative. So it's worth it for me to just wait.
You can argue, right, that domains in nature are pretty speculative, right, to a certain extent. Maybe not .coms, but to a certain extent. Is maybe getting in early on this Web3 wave just too much risk or speculativeness for you, or?
Certainly there's a lot of speculation, and I mean, I have gravitated towards the top of the market to the most valuable names because it's less speculative, right? Because if I buy a oneword.com and let's say I spend $200,000 or $300,000 on that one name, to a lot of people, this alternative asset class seems very speculative because they don't understand it, but I'm buying a name that I know is going to be worth $3 million, and so that's why I can spend $300,000 on it. And it's not going to go out of business. It's not going to. I do startup investing too, and 75% of those just go out of business altogether, right? So even if it takes me 10 years and I don't sell it for $3 million, I can probably sell it for $500,000 wholesale because it's been 10 years and it's appreciated in value. So it's just not going to go down in value because I'm buying the most valuable tier of this asset class.
Right, and have you seen, maybe they don't reach, $700,000, $800,000, $1 million for maybe a Web3 TLD yet, but is there ramblings maybe in your industry of where the Web3 domain name, space is going to? Have you heard of maybe these premium tier domain names going for a certain amount yet, or is that still far?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot of discussion. I don't really follow it. Right. I mean, I did at one point, and then values dropped. The only one I picked up was Braden.eth. So I have that just in case.
Wait, do you have a wallet?
Of course I have
You're part of us now, you see what I mean?
Of course I have a wallet.
Yeah, you're part of us.
It's not connected to my wallet, but I got pretty deep down the NFT rabbit hole. And
nice.
Yeah.
Oh, you're a degen at heart, just like us.
Yeah, Ethereum and Bitcoin and all that. I was actually mining Bitcoin years ago.
Goodness, that's fantastic.
It was about $3,000 when I was mining Bitcoin.
So you do have risk appetite.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I'd love to somehow onboard him into, starting to get into the Web3 domain space and invest there a little bit. Are the risks just, again, in your mind, Karen, like, I just try to, I want to weigh the risks of doing something like this. Let's say I'm in Braden's shoes. What do I have to take into account before deploying, 6, 7, 8 figures into, I'd say very infant avenue?
First of all, why would you spend that much money?
You have to take risks, right? Well, you ask him. He's the one paying the big bucks for .com.
Why
right?
would you spend six figures for a Web3 domain or
I'm a degen.
public identity?
There's guys out here that yesterday or 2 days ago spent $300,000 on a JPEG again. I saw them.
Well,
so it's possible.
The ape JPEG thing.
Fred, cover your
very
ears.
Bullish about it. I find it.
That too. Yeah.
I know several Web2 domain investors who have invested in those NFTs, and that's fun if you have some cash out of your pocket. But in terms of a serious investment, I don't see it happening for Web3 right now.
Why? Just why? Like
because
obviously.
there's not much you can do with these Web3 names.
Well, okay, so then
Tell me what can you do with a Web3 name? You can use it as a wallet, right? But what else can you do with it?
Yeah, so I'll give you a perfect example. The recent scams that are going on right now are where, and I won't get into the technical details, but creating for example, a Solana wallet, I can create it with the last 5 digits however I want, right? Using CLI, I can say your wallet address ends in 12345. I can also create one that ends in 12345.
Yeah.
And then going to a block explorer, when you see an abbreviated address, you can see that, oh, this just ends in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So how the scams are going now is,
Oh, I know.
I want to send you money. I just copy it from the block explorer.
Yeah.
But if the hacker already had spoofed an event using the same 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it looks the same to you. And since it's abbreviated, you can't see the whole address. So
Yeah.
I send money to the wrong person.
Yeah,
And that's currently
I'm
what's
aware
happening.
of this problem. But you were talking before about the
yes.
value of having an identity, which is, yes, you have an identity and you can send it to whatever .core or .ape, but what about the alternate routes? What about someone else who's just spoofing it in an alternate route? I mean, you'd have to know what you were doing, right?
Of course, yeah.
But just saying theoretically that it's easier to download these browsers and somehow you're in some other alternative route. I know it seems far-fetched. And you send money to the wrong wallet, like you said, I agree that the concept of having a wallet with an identity absolutely is a fantastic idea. I also see that there might be ways in the future where people are duped into downloading a wrong browser and going into an alternative route. I think the idea of having official alternate routes through ICANN is very smart because, as Braden had said, it's got to work its way out and find out which one is going to work the best, right? There might be 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, but to be able to somehow verify in the future, some technical way of verifying that's the authentic Web3 that you're in will be very helpful to avoid fraud, but doesn't stop anybody from swapping your SIM card or hacking into things right now, and there's always going to be bad actors.
Yeah, and I think that's fair to point, right? It's not always going to be perfect in that sense, but going back to that, it's a security thing, right? It secures maybe the Web3 side a little more. I think when we start implementing payments on the Web2 side, and for a casual domainer that wants to start an e-commerce business and automatically take cryptocurrency as payment anywhere in the world in a decentralized fashion, not through an on-ramp or off-ramp or some intermediary, I think knowing that you're interacting with the company's wallet is beneficial as well too, right? So say you're selling something and you have that true identity. It's the Karen.eth. And I know that's your website, that's your email, that's your customer support. If I wanted to transact in a decentralized manner, I could buy whatever you're selling, and I know that when I interact with that wallet, it's yours.
Well, I think that security of the internet is, whether it's in Web3 or not, is of utmost importance with ICANN circles. And certainly within your organization, you fit right into ICANN. I'm sorry, sir, what is your name again? I'm sorry.
Andreas.
Andreas.
Yeah.
Yes, your organization actually, I think, fits perfectly with ICANN. I love your approach. I love your approach on a governmental level. I think that in ICANN, you could certainly have people that could get involved with being part of the multi-stakeholder society within ICANN. I think it would change people. I think it would be a good thing.
I mean, it fits also what we do with other policymakers and
the
regulators.
NGOs,
you need to go out and speak to them.
Yeah.
You cannot wait for them to come to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's also great because you mentioned, Andreas, well, Fred in his previous talk mentioned you guys have been up for the longest standing, right, outside of Bitcoin. And that's, we need that if we want to bridge the Web 2 gap. The outages we've seen on different chains and like some downtime is probably unacceptable to an investor like Braden, who's holding names, is running businesses on these names, and something goes down, he's not used to that, right? So why is that of utmost importance to solidify before making that transition to Web 2?
Well, it is crucial. I mean, who would invest in a technology that is not sustainable, not stable, and not available in a way that you need it to run crucial, essential infrastructure? You would do a basic due diligence, and I would say pretty much every layer 1 blockchain would probably fail.
Yeah.
And that's why you don't see true adoption in a way that classic Web 2 use cases have been transferred or migrated into Web 3 or blockchain technology. It's mostly projects, cool stuff, which I love, but it's not like legacy that is replaced. So it's always something new that is built, which is amazing. But in order to get the full adoption, we need to be able to transform cases that come from legacy Web 2 into the new space. And for that, you need to have a reliable infrastructure that has gone through all the governance and all the agreement with the regulators and the policymakers.
Yep. It's a lot of policy.
It's a lot of work,
Yeah.
and it's really truly boring. Huh? Nobody
Yeah.
likes to do
And
that.
interesting at the same time.
Yeah, so I'll go back to something interesting you said there. Like, it's really tough for any layer one currently to sustain, running like a .com on a chain of some sort. There's just way too much volume, way too much transactions. It's such a big business, and maybe there isn't a layer one at the moment that can withstand that. What has to happen, you think, for big adoption, truly mass adoption, say like a .com or a .net, .gov, to live on blockchain and resolve like that?
Well, it's new technology. Yeah? Sure. We're all aware of that, and it's still growing. I see it more like a child that is growing up, and we are suddenly now we're becoming teenagers, and still have some challenges. The teenage area is a challenging one, but we need to become adults in order to have true adoption, and that has not yet happened.
Yeah, awesome. I'll leave, you just went, so last remarks before we close out. Braden, thank you for sharing those insights. That was fantastic. In private, you also shared some stuff too. That was great. And coming from the domain world, investing as much as you have, give your honest thoughts on Web3. I know you've been skeptical for a little bit, but is there any positive you see in the space going forward?
Well, I think it's a technology that's coming, but all these chains aren't going to work, right? So I don't want to invest in a bunch of different strings that are going to fail. And also, it's going to take years for mass adoption, right? So there's so much speculation there. It's so speculative between the technology growing up, becoming an adult, and then all the weak chains dying. So it's not ready for me to invest yet, because it would be such a long hold, and I would lose most of my money, I think. I'll just wait until and like I said, I'll pay more, but I won't have the long hold time, and I'll be able to narrow down to the few that are probably most likely the winners.
Nice. Thank you for that insight. And then Karen, to you to close off, where do you see Web3 as a whole transitioning or making that concerted effort to bridge Web 2 here? I know you have a lot of thoughts on your mind legally, but honest thoughts on Web3. I know you've also been a little bit skeptical, but
Well, it's not that I'm skeptical. I kind of agree with Braden that it's still nascent.
She keeps agreeing with me.
I
This
know.
is the first time. I've known her for years. She's never agreed with me so much.
But no, I think that the Web3 has a long way to go. I still stand by my concept of the more you bring it to the mainstream in the ICANN community, the more adoption you'll get. And there are certain principles at ICANN, such as universal acceptance, which Fred spoke about this morning, and that is to be accepting of all sorts of ways of access on the internet. And their slogan for ICANN is one internet. Well, which internet is it, right? But it could be multiple internets, and I just think that there needs to be more of this. I love this bridging of Web 2 and Web 3, but I just think that you have to make it a lot more understandable to the public in marketing and an easy downloadable browser and things like that would be much, I would say, user-friendly and an understanding what to do with it. And obviously the technology has to get better. And also from an environmental point of view, it has to get better.
awesome. Thank you for those thoughts.
Sure.
That was fantastic. Great panel. A round of applause for our guests. Thank you guys for taking the time. You guys have been fantastic.